Nice to see you. We're carrying on with our normal for 2020 business reactions. I'm Tom Caulfield, agricultural partner at Arnold's Keys. With me, Mark Mayhew, commercial partner at Arnold's Keys. Very pleased to say that we've got Leanne Frid with us this afternoon from Bookbugs and Dragon Tales. And Leanne, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to speak to us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Leanne, can you just tell us a little bit about yourselves and a little bit about the business, please?
Yeah, certainly. So we are Bookbugs and Dragon Tales. We are a predominantly children's bookshop on Timber Hill, although we do sell grown-up books too. We specialise in events and books and classes for the young and the young at heart. That's what we say.
Great. I mean, the retail sort of sector has been sort of facing many challenges. I imagine sort of 23rd of March and full lockdown was quite catastrophic for you.
Very. As a new business, so we only opened our shop doors on the 17th of August 2019, which feels really recently and also a million years ago at the same time. So we were only open for 7 months before we went into lockdown. And while we had managed to establish a fairly loyal customer base, we're super aware that when we went into lockdown, we hadn't been around long enough to be fully in people's consciousness when it came to the alternative of being in front of a computer. So we had to work incredibly hard to try and get people to see us as a viable alternative.
Going through all that, I suppose, lockdown, shutdown, no customers, no business, to then obviously the relaxation and sort of reopening. Any challenges on the reopening?
Well, throughout lockdown, what we did was we decided, I had like a couple of weeks where I was really down and stressed, and I wasn't able to access any of the funding available because we were new and I was newly self-employed. But I sulked for 2 weeks and then I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. And what we did then was we moved so much of our stuff online. We did free local delivery. We did daily story time reading on Facebook Lives throughout. We did escape packs for adults where we put in some books and some nice treats and things. We did everything we could to try and keep ourselves in people's consciousness, really. And particularly, my background was education, so I was a teacher for a long time. And I was very aware that I had never chosen to homeschool my own children for a reason. And so suddenly all of these families were faced with homeschooling their kids for the first time. So I really felt that I needed to do something about that. So I stepped up and we created homeschool packs that were age appropriate. So a parent could contact us and say, give me a homeschool pack. And so we put together 5 books that covered broadly some areas that the children might be interested in to try and help that. So we were kind of aware throughout lockdown that we needed to be super on it, even though we didn't have the premises. We used it as a base so that we could make sure that we could still get books delivered. And then the reopening itself was incredibly interesting because we're predominantly children, and children really don't know what 2 meters is, which was the guidelines when we first started. I think some adults don't know what 2 meters are either. So what we did was in the shop, we put 2 meter square foam pieces on the floor, and we had like a giant snakes and ladders game so that children would be aware that if they were in the blue square, for example, they couldn't go into the orange square if someone was in it. So we tried to make those visual cues as well and tried to make it fun because, you know, social distancing and everyone wearing masks can be quite scary.
Yeah.
A few sort of new business practices, shall we say, you know, that you had to sort of, you know, jump to quite quickly, you know, during lockdown and things. Has everything sort of made you think a little bit differently about sort of, you know, business planning and where you're going?
We certainly had to rethink things quite seriously because obviously our business plan that we wrote prior to opening did not include a global pandemic, so we hadn't really planned for that. We had to, but because we were new, we had a clear vision of what we wanted the shop to be and how we wanted people to interact with it. So I suppose we were quite lucky that we were still near the planning stage when this happened. So we just had to rethink. So we've restarted our classes again recently, but under the new COVID restrictions. So we've got 2-meter creation stations is what we call them, where the children are in their own area and things like that. You have to, everything, I think, during this time, in lockdown and post-lockdown, everything just takes so much more thought and preparation and care. You can't just do something spur of the moment.
You've got a lot of positives, how you've reacted. Are there any sort of standout positives for you?
To be fair, it's mostly the wonderful customers, because when we went into lockdown properly, and we had to shut the shop to all intents and purposes, and we didn't know what we could do, and we didn't have a huge online presence. We had a small one, and all of our amazing customers stepped up. They chose us. They came to us in spite of the fact that they were in front of a computer where a bookshop I don't want to name is easier, and to be honest, probably cheaper, because they don't pay tax or they're a fair wage. But for various reasons, but they still chose us, and that was incredibly heartwarming that they had that choice and they still chose us. And that's made me feel so much more accepted as part of the high street, and also so much more valued as a business. And unfortunately, our business went down to about 20% of what it ordinarily was, and in year one we break even, if that. So 20% is a massive hit in terms of our ability to stay open, but we're all in this situation together. And so we do try and be optimistic, because we pay the bills at the beginning of the month and we say, well, we're here for this month. And we can't do anything more than that,
No. I mean, there's much talk about sort of city centres and sort of what's going on in terms of reduced footfall. How do you feel sort of Timber Hill and sort of the Norwich lanes?
Well, Timber Hill particularly is up and coming. So people don't necessarily include Timber Hill in part of their shopping experience, because they don't realise how much has changed in the last sort of 5 years. There are so many independents, really cool boutiques and things like that. It's really on the up and up. But people are still sort of discovering Timber Hill as a shopping destination. So we generally struggle with that anyway, but footfall is definitely down. But then we're affected by things like children go back to school. We're affected by the rain. Everything is such a big influence on us. So I looked at our figures this year based on last year, when we'd only been open a tiny amount of time, and there's not a great deal of difference. I think we're finding that fewer customers are coming in, but they're making larger purchases generally.
Yeah.
Which I think is the case around, everywhere, because people, if they're going to come into the city, they're going to do it in one hit and then they're going to leave.
Yeah. Leanne, there's a number of different sort of government measures out there, furlough scheme, the civil loans, etc., etc. Have you been able to make use of any of those? Have you used any of those?
Yeah, so we were able to furlough our staff, which was really helpful, because that's meant that they have both now come back and they were secure throughout furlough. I was unable to furlough myself, and I was unable to claim any of the self-employment grant, because I hadn't been self-employed long enough. Because I only became self-employed last August, so there was nothing to kind of compare. We were fortunate enough to get a grant because we've got the building. So obviously these things sort of, what they did was they helped us to keep ticking over, which was all we could do. Obviously the rate reduction is really helpful. And, we'll see that longer term. And yeah, so we've tried to access what we can, but we're not established enough, or we've only got 2 members of staff, so we're not exactly claiming millions from the furlough scheme.
No.
How was your discussions with your landlord?
I didn't have any.
Okay.
Basically, I tried to have a discussion prior to lockdown when it was looking like it might happen.
Yes.
And he said, "We'll wait and see." But they're a small business too, I guess. And so, as much as it would be lovely to have a bit of a rent holiday, if they're a small business, we're a small business. The economy needs to keep running. So we had very little discussion.
And there's lots of talk about people's well-being, physical and mental well-being, during lockdown and furlough period, etc., etc. And especially now as we sort of face new measures and something for like the next 6 months. I guess with a smaller team that you have there, was it easy to sort of keep in contact with everybody and make sure they were doing okay?
Yeah, and well-being is kind of at the heart of what we do, both for children and for adults and for our staff. So we've got a WhatsApp group, so we were able to just check in. To be fair, most of my staff only work 3 days each, two and a half days each prior to lockdown. And so it didn't have as an enormous impact on them as if they were suddenly not working and they had previously been full-time. So one of my staff members, who you may know, took up gardening to the extreme and homeschooling children and things like that. And the other member of staff, she's an actor and a spoken word poet, so she used the time to kind of do some of her own stuff, which was really lovely.
To know is where Bookbugs and Dragon Tales came from.
So it is so it's based on a story by a lady called Dorothy Stickney, and Doris Stickney, sorry, and it's a story called Waterbugs and Dragonflies, and it sounds really morbid because it's actually a book that explains grief to children. So what we wanted to do is we're very fortunate. We've got 5 children between us. We've got a lovely big family, but we've also got members of our family who aren't here anymore. And so to name the shop Bookbugs and Dragon Tales was our way of incorporating those who aren't here into this exciting project that everyone who's in our families is.
Longer term projects, development of your business and things like that, are those sorts of things, are they now just purely ideas and, if you like, scribblings in a book, or are you still got irons in the fire which, despite everything that's going on, you want to sort of try and progress?
We are really keen to progress our schools work. So there are several schools in Norfolk and Suffolk that we work quite closely with, doing pop-ups. The kids come into the shop, we do activities and events with them. So school stuff is really great for us because we get to be involved with watching the young people grow and having our input into that. So that's all continuing. We're really fortunate that now the schools have gone back, they're starting to look at their stock and think, okay, how can we upgrade this, particularly in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that. So they're starting to recognise that maybe they don't have people of colour in their books, in their library as much as they perhaps should. So we're kind of helping to do that sort of thing. But really excitingly, so this is something that we're going to be launching in time for October half term, is we have something called the Dorothy Amory Reader Awards. Dorothy Amory was a primary school teacher in Norfolk her whole life, sadly passed away just over a year ago. And her husband is a patron of the shop. And he's donated money to us to distribute to children who would benefit from having books. So we're launching this Reader Award in collaboration with schools. We're going to ask them to recommend children that would be part of our reading review team. And they get to come into the shop and choose £50 worth of books and in honor of her memory, basically. So, you know, these sorts of things that we really, really, really want to remain as part of the heart of the community. That's always what we've been about, and that's what we want to continue to do. So we're constantly able to kind of keep those things going, hopefully.
I think that's lovely. What a great legacy as well.
It is.
Super. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like we can see sort of people wandering around your shop, so you're plenty still visitors coming in, which is great news.
Yeah. We'd like more, though. That would always be helpful. And we'd just like more people to know about us, because, to be honest with you, once people find us and use us, they always come back. You know, we've got over 2,000 loyalty card customers, you know, which shows that there is this real need for this community and this outreach and this support. And, you know, we're just a nice place to come and hang out and have a coffee, if nothing else.
If nothing else. Well, when we're next passing, when Tom and I are next passing, we will certainly...
Yeah, we'll come in.
We'll come in.
I'll buy you a coffee.
Well, thank you ever so much for joining us this afternoon.
No problem.
At your time. Very exciting to hear about plans, what you've been through, and your innovation. And thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. I'd just like to say as well, I think that we're indicative of all Norfolk businesses in terms of, come on, we'll do this together. I think that there's a real positivity in terms of that, and I think it's great, and long may it continue, despite everything.
In spite of everything. Leanne, thank you
Thanks,
ever so
Leanne.
much.
Thank you. Take care.